covering episode 506, Better to Marry Than Burn, with the fiery cross and a breath of snow and ashes. Now, if you haven't read the books or watched the episode, be advised that spoilers are coming. This episode's title is directly taken from the book. It is a part 5 of the fiery cross, 'Tis Better to Marry Than Burn. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this episode, so we're actually going to start with the events that are taken from A Breath of Snow and Ashes. So let's do it. So now that the show and the novel's timelines have diverted quite a bit, I'm going to go with an event from A Breath of Snow and Ashes first. Now, if you want to read, it is on page 110. It's really only one page. But our show does it a completely different way, and I feel like it combines sort of two events into one. In the novel, there's an event where Claire is telling us how a cloud of grasshoppers came up and went onto one field, and all the men were gone. You know, Jamie's off doing something. Roger is actually had been at River Run, and he's bringing new tenants back to the ridge. So all the men are gone. Claire notices first there's these grasshoppers in her own garden patch. So she, Lizzie, and Mrs. Bug drive them off with brooms, but they all settle on someone's field. So Claire decides to torch it. She burns down the field so that no one else's fields will get, ruined by the grasshopper. Now in your show, it's actually Roger who has this event with the grasshoppers. Bree and Roger are at home on the ridge, and Claire and Jamie are actually at Jocasta's wedding. So they make it a point that Bree and Roger don't show up for Jocasta's wedding, and Bree says, "Oh, Roger, Jocasta insulted you at our wedding, so you're gonna insult her right back and not show up at her wedding." But Roger's like, "Well, your dad left me in charge, so this is my time to shine, and I will take care of the ridge while he's gone." He doesn't think it's gonna be much of a problem until cute little Adso the kitten brings in a grasshopper, and then he starts to notice, oh my gosh, there's grasshoppers at the window. Roger's not sure what to do. And so he's feeling nervous and everyone's mad. "Well, Roger, you're in charge. What do we do?" So Roger thinks back to his former past and remembers a story he was read that it's something about grasshoppers being driven off by smoke. So he has everyone in the ridge making, pots of smoke, building fires, and kind of putting them all around the fields, some actually in the fields, to create tons of smoke. Whereas Claire with the grasshoppers in the novel literally burns the field down. Roger is creating smoke on all the fields to try to get the grasshoppers not even to land to begin with. Which is a really good call, because later on when you see the cloud of grasshoppers, it's massive. And those grasshoppers could have definitely eaten up all of the fields in the ridge. So Roger's plan works, and the grasshoppers don't really land. Of course some of them do, but comparatively, his plan works with the smoke, and he keeps the grasshoppers from destroying the ridge. Now, I think this event is also akin to something in the fiery cross that does involve Roger and does involve smoke. So I think the show kind of combined these two elements into one event. In our novel, Roger is sent out to do the surveying, which actually appears in a later episode of our show. Now, at the same time in our novel, Jamie and some others are asked by a Cherokee village to help them kill a bear that, keeps stealing stuff, but also some people have died. And so Jamie and the party set out to go kill a bear. Everyone decides that they're going to set fire to this very thick canebrake because they think the bear went in there. As Roger is surveying, he's close enough, but not with this party that's searching for the bear, so he has no idea what's going on. All he knows is he finds himself in this canebrake, and he's lost, and uh-oh, I smell smoke. I smell burning. So Roger can't breathe, and he does make it to this creek, gets some water, gets a little bit of air, but then he passes out. He wakes up, and someone has taken him prisoner. So he finds himself in this hut, and who should appear but Mrs. Fanny Beardsley again, if you will recall from episode 503, Free Will. Apparently, Fanny Beardsley has now found her lost love, who is the father of her child, and now living with them, you know, kind of in secret. Roger immediately recognizes her from the description that Claire and Jamie gave of this woman. And Roger also has his surveying astrolabe has Jamie's name on it, so she says, hey, you're not Jamie Fraser, and he says, no, I'm his son-in-law. So it's kind of Roger's ticket out of being held captive by these people. And there's this really beautiful moment where Roger tells Fanny Beardsley and her love that their daughter is doing well, and she's really pretty, so I think that's a really beautiful moment. The episode actually opens with a cool flashback of Jocasta, her husband Hector, and their daughter trying to escape after Culloden. In her novel, Jocasta tells us this story at River Run, but it's cool to see it, you know, happening in real time in the show. What happens is Hector had this French gold that was supposed to go to Culloden, and it arrived too late. So as he's trying to sneak it out, in our show, you see the two English soldiers, one of them discovers it underneath, and when he realizes, you know, the jig is up, he tries to fight these soldiers, and he ends up shooting his daughter instead. So Jocasta's always lived with this guilt because she, you know, left her daughter dead right there along the road, and she and Hector escaped to freedom in the New World. We see Jocasta breaking down and telling Murtaugh this story in our show, where in the novel she's telling it to, you know, Jamie, Claire, Roger, Bree, everyone, and Bree and Roger are at her wedding in our novel. If you will recall, Murtaugh is not in our novel because he had died at Culloden, so Murtaugh's been dead for a long time, but they kept him alive in the show. Murtaugh comes in Jocasta's room, and she's mad because he's waited to the last minute. She's getting married tomorrow. She's just like, why are you here? And also, the governor is here, and he's been looking for you. He wants to, you know, kill you, so you should probably get out of here. Murtaugh now has realized his feelings for Jocasta, so he's come to try to, you know, win her at the last minute. And she knows that he is going to follow his course with the regulators, and she thinks it's probably going to end badly. So she decides, no, I'm still going to get married tomorrow, even though I love you, because I want peace in my life. I don't want war. So it's very sad in the moment, you know, that they're not going to be together. I didn't feel like I needed to have Jocasta and Murtaugh together anyway, because if you remember all the way back to book 1, you know, season 1, we find out Murtaugh had been in love with Jamie's mom. And now they're shifting it to, oh, now he's in love with Jamie's aunt. It's like, it doesn't, you know, I don't need them to be together. And I had a premonition that Murtaugh would not be lasting much longer. So at the wedding, there's several days where everyone's there, and there's this guy, Philip Wiley, who we've met briefly in the past. Well, he definitely has a thing for Claire, and our show did it in a cool way where Claire and actually Governor Tryon's wife are talking, and they just look at him and they roll their eyes because he's just powdered to no end. And they're like, "Ugh, look, he's coming." And Mrs. Tryon says, "No, he's coming towards you." Now, our book and our show do Philip Wiley quite different. In our novel, basically Philip Wiley, he's really into Claire, but otherwise he's not like that bad of a guy. He doesn't necessarily have major dealings with our chief villain, Stephen Bonnet. In our show, though, it is very clear that Bonnet and Wiley are in cahoots. Being the brave woman that we know she is, she wants to get to the bottom of how does Philip Wiley know Stephen Bonnet. And first of all, she has the hunch, but she didn't know for sure. And sure enough, she's right. They work together. So Claire tries to work it out that, maybe we can set up a whiskey partnership. Since my husband needs to smuggle out this whiskey that he's making illegally, maybe we can work together and you can make some money off this if you'll set up a meeting with Stephen Bonnet for us. So after they have their business discussion, Wiley wants to show Claire his prized horse. And the horse is rather beautiful, and Claire's looking at it, and then Wiley comes on to her. She gets him off, and I really like how they did in this show. He falls, I think, in a pile of horse poo. And, of course, Jamie comes out and pulls his knife on him, and it's like, yes! If I ever see you near my wife again. Love Jamie! Philip Wiley is quite a gambling man, so in our show, Jamie goes up to him and he's like, "I'm gonna win back my honor right now." So Jamie's collateral in the gambling match are Claire's wedding rings, both of them from Frank and him, and she's mad that is the stakes. But Jamie wins Philip Wiley's prized horse Lucas from him. It's the perfect way to get back at Philip Wiley because it's like his pride and joy. And if Jamie wanted his honor back, he got it. Now, Jamie agrees to sell him the horse back, but he's like, "Hey, I can make some money off this." Now, all of these things happen in our novel, but there's actually a little more going on in addition to this. In our show, they didn't mention this at all, but back in episode 1 at the gathering, in our novel, someone is trying to prevent weddings, christenings, these kind of things from happening. And they figure it out, maybe it's because people don't want Jocasta and Duncan to get married. This theme comes back on the days leading up to and during the wedding. Jamie can't find Duncan at all on the day of the wedding, and they're just, where is he? What's going on? Then later on, they find one of the slaves is completely passed out, and she had a drink in her hand. And so they think, well, maybe she's just drunk. And so they talk to some of the people, "Oh yeah, she does drink, but she's out on a completely different level." Well, they figure out that maybe she drank something that was meant for Duncan, meant to either kill him or knock him out at least enough that he would miss his wedding and or be thrown into the river at River Run and drowned. So they realize something weird's going on. So then this poor woman is horribly sick. She's throwing up. And when Claire comes in, there's actually another doctor there. She's dying and she's throwing up blood and dying right there on the floor. So Claire's like, man, there's something weird. And this is when, if you will remember from episode 2, Claire does an autopsy on someone on the ridge. Well, actually, in our novel, Claire does an autopsy on this slave woman to try to figure out, why did she die? What happened? And she ends up finding ground glass in her stomach. And so Claire realizes someone killed her on purpose. Why? Because whoever did this did not want to risk being identified as the person who gave her this food that had glass in it. Now when Claire's doing this autopsy, she's out in a barn and someone starts coming in and she looks and it's Philip Wiley. And she's thinking, uh-oh, this is gonna be awkward. But then a little ways behind him is Stephen Bonnet. In our novel, Stephen Bonnet actually shows up at River Run on the day of the wedding. Stephen Bonnet gets away by stealing Lucas Wiley's horse. Meanwhile, someone had tied up Jocasta and knocked out Duncan, and Jocasta, being blind, obviously couldn't see who it was. So Claire, Jamie, Roger, Bree, everyone is trying to put this all together, and they deduce that Stephen Bonnet and probably Philip Wiley, maybe someone else, were here to try to steal some of that Jacobite gold that we saw in the intro of this episode that Hector Cameron was trying to sneak out of Scotland. So this whole wedding event turned into a sort of murder mystery. So there's a lot of stuff going on at this wedding. Now, one more quick scene that they added in the show that's not in the book is they have Gerald Forbes, Jocasta's lawyer, meeting Stephen Bonnet at a coffee shop. And earlier in the episode, they have Jocasta officially signing River Run over to Jemmy, Bree and Roger's son, which, you know, is he Roger's son or is he Stephen Bonnet's son is always a question hanging in the air. And so the scene where Forbes and Bonnet are at the coffee shop, Forbes tells Stephen Bonnet, your son is now the heir to River Run. I really like this episode. I really love this part of the book. There's so much going on, and I loved how, you know, they did things a little different in the show, but I still like the original way of doing it. Just all in all, a really great episode. Thank you so much for watching Outlandish Comparison. Please subscribe and turn on the notifications, and I'll see you real soon.
Islands and seas, mountains of rain and sun.